Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're tackling a topic that practically everyone has incredibly strong feelings about, yet, honestly, it remains wildly misunderstood. We're talking about debt. Now, normally, just hearing that four-letter word makes people tense up, right? But we're going to dive into some absolutely fascinating source material today to unpack the mechanics of what we call the leverage divide and how strategic wealth is actually built through managed debt. Stick with me, because by the end of our time today, you might find that the way you view borrowed money fundamentally changes.
Think about it. Since we were kids, we've had this one absolute financial rule just drilled into our heads. Debt is dangerous, period. The traditional advice is literally everywhere. You know the drill: pay it off as fast as humanly possible, cut up those credit cards, and stay far, far away from loans. It's basically the accepted gospel of everyday personal finance. But what if debt isn't inherently dangerous? What if the conventional wisdom is only giving us half the story? Section 1. The Great Debt Divide. Okay, let's dive into this. Because the jarring reality here is that while average earners are doing absolutely everything in their power to achieve a zero-debt lifestyle, a lot of wealthy people and successful investors are actively going in the exact opposite direction. No joke. They actually take on loans not out of desperation, but as a highly calculated strategy. You see, the difference between financial struggle and financial acceleration isn't the debt itself. The debt is just a neutral instrument. A loan? It's really just math on a piece of paper. The fundamental difference is how that debt is used. Debt is merely a mechanism. Think of it like a hammer. You can use a hammer to build a beautiful house, or you can use it to completely smash your own thumb. The hammer doesn't care either way.
Section 2. Why debt causes stress. Now, before we get into the high-level strategies, we really have to acknowledge why debt causes such genuine anxiety. For a vast number of families, borrowing money is nothing but a source of intense stress and, frankly, sleepless nights. It's totally understandable. The psychological burden stacks up so quickly, it's like a cascading effect. First, you've got growing credit card balances. You buy a few things, the balance creeps up. Then comes the second layer, increasing interest payments. Suddenly, you aren't just paying for the stuff you bought, you're paying this massive premium just for the privilege of having bought them. And that cascades right into the final layer, difficult monthly bills. The cash flow gets tight, and you start to feel completely trapped. Because of these very real, very painful experiences, so many hardworking people just logically conclude that all debt is universally harmful.
Section 3. Good debt versus bad debt.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how it highlights a massive fork in the road when you borrow money. On one side, we have the destruction of bad debt. This is when you're borrowing for depreciating consumer goods. We're talking high-interest credit cards used for expensive everyday purchases or luxury items. In this scenario, you're paying high interest on something that is actively losing value the second you buy it, which carries a massive opportunity cost. But then, on the flip side, is good debt. This is debt used strategically to acquire assets. Think business loans to expand a company or real estate investments. This side of the equation is all about income-generating power. You are leveraging borrowed money to buy something that puts money back into your pocket, often at a rate that completely outpaces inflation.
Section 4. The wealthy leverage strategy. Understanding that distinction we just talked about, that unlocks the door to how successful investors actually operate. This is what financial professionals call leverage. Now, we already know what an asset is. It's an acquisition that generates income or appreciates, like a rental property or maybe new business equipment. The magic formula here is simple, but incredibly powerful. If the asset you buy grows in value or generates income at a rate that's faster than the cost of borrowing the money, your wealth increases. For example, if you borrow money at 4% interest to buy a property that yields 8% in rental income, you capture that difference. In that scenario, the debt is literally working for you.
But, and this is a big but, our source material is very clear on this. Leverage is definitely not a magic wand. It involves significant risk. If that rental property sits empty, or if that business expansion totally fails, guess what? You still owe the principal, and you still owe the interest. Poor decisions, or honestly just bad timing in the market, can absolutely lead to severe losses. Using this strategy requires incredibly careful management, really strict discipline, and a cold, hard look at the math.
Section 5. 5 Smart Debt Principles. Let's move to and see how this builds into an actionable, empowering framework. The source material actually outlines 5 clear rules to keep you on the right side of this divide. Ready? Step 1. Never borrow without fully understanding the true total cost of the interest over time. Step 2. Aggressively avoid high-interest consumer debt. Rule of thumb, if it loses value, don't finance it. Step 3, keep your focus strictly on assets that generate income rather than liabilities that just drain it. Step 4, fully understand your downside risk before signing any paperwork. And finally, step 5, use debt strategically, never emotionally. You don't borrow to keep up with the neighbors, right? You borrow because the math makes sense.
It all really comes back to this core idea. Debt is a tool, not a guarantee. This perfectly summarizes everything we've covered today. Debt itself is neither good nor bad. It has absolutely zero intrinsic morality. Some people use this tool recklessly to buy depreciating liabilities, and they end up feeling trapped. But others use this exact same tool deliberately to acquire cash-flowing assets, and they end up building generational wealth.
Which leaves us with this final, incredibly important question. Understanding that the Great Divide isn't about avoiding debt altogether, but rather mastering it. Knowing the difference between the hammer that builds and the hammer that breaks, how will you use the tool of debt? It really changes the way you think about money, doesn't it? Thank you so much for joining me today for this explainer. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll catch you next time.